Hello, everyone. This is Megan,
And this is Alana.
and welcome to Tea Time Crimes. Hello. How you doing?
Hi.
What's up?
Just living the dream. How about you?
Fighting a cold, but
Yeah.
it actually fits into today's story pretty well.
Oh boy.
Today's story, it reminds me, do you remember The Office where Michael is in the break room and he wants to talk to Jim, but Stanley's trying to pick out a drink, so Jim won't talk to him? And Stanley's taking forever, an incredibly long time. And so Michael, like with the anger of 1,000 suns, hits a button and looks him dead in the eye and says, "Peach iced tea. You're going to hate it." And storms out. Do you remember that scene?
No, I don't, but it sounds perfect.
Well, today is peach iced tea for you. You're going to hate it.
Oh, no.
But yeah, on that note, I mean, we should just jump into your tea review, I feel, because
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're about to get mad.
Great. All right. Today we have a white lemon ginger tea. I was feeling a little under the weather myself, so I thought this would be a good one. I got the
Copycat.
tea bag for you. Got a lot of stuff in it.
Oh, I love when you show me a pile of dirt. That's always helpful.
The description is delicate Himalayan silver tips and luscious white peony tea paired refreshingly with lemon and ginger. Exotic tea blend in bold.
Whoa.
All
Whoa.
right.
What's the name of it?
White lemon ginger.
Yep, that's right. Not super creative name.
Yeah, right. This is a white tea, I believe, which has a little bit of caffeine.
What made you believe that? The fact that it was called white lemon? Did you say a white tea? Did you say a white tea or a light tea?
White.
Is that, I don't know what that means.
Smells like lemon.
Oh, man. These are some twists and turns on today's tea review.
I need to wipe my chapstick off because I think I'm tasting that. And it's brown sugar like cinnamon. Okay, hold on. Fix that up.
You have to have a clean palate.
I know.
Try again. Take two.
Okay, I taste the ginger. Ooh, that's nice. I could let this steep all day so it'd kick me in the back of the throat. That'd be cool.
Oh my God, that sounds awful.
This is a great tea. Especially if you're under the weather. If I could, I'd send you this cup. But it'd probably be cold and broken by the time it got to you. But it's
very thoughtful.
Yeah, no, it's a very light body tea. Like a white tea is, I don't know. Nowhere near a full body black tea. But this is nice for when you're not feeling well. You get that lemon and ginger.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll be sipping away.
Is it ginger that you had to take when you were a kid, or was it garlic?
I mean, ginger would be part of the cold tea. She'd mix in all types of citrus, ginger, and a little honey, and you'd just glug that down.
Didn't she put garlic in your ears, or am I making that up?
Garlic drops.
Yeah, yep. your lovely mom, Jackie.
Yes. So when we'd get ear owies, or earaches.
That's a medical word.
I remember, this is a kindergarten memory. I remember like hating having like these garlic smelling ears with cotton balls in them. Maybe that's why I don't like the cotton thing.
What cotton thing? The sound of cotton?
I can't handle cotton rubbing together.
Yeah, that's true. You can't.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, which I don't know how that's happening naturally in your life on a regular basis.
Okay, so hair towel, body towel. If they touch, it's game over. Because it's right on your ears.
But it doesn't. It's not loud.
You feel it. That's the problem. It's like a drill, basically.
Wow, I didn't know. Is that? I don't even notice that sound. Oh gosh, you know what gives me that? I know exactly what you mean though. What gives me that feeling is the sound of somebody else cutting their nails. Oh, I hate it so much.
We used to work together, and in the other room they'd do manicure and pedicures, and we'd be close enough that sometimes you could hear it, and it'd be her favorite thing.
I can't. It doesn't bother me when I'm the one holding the clippers, but man.
Like, could you do it to somebody else?
So far, only my son.
Okay. Not Brad.
Nah. I mean, I don't want to live in a world where I have to cut Brad's toenails, but I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, I want him to be self-sufficient enough to handle that for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you make a good point. I'm going to start saving now and just make sure I have a toenail nurse on standby when he gets to be 90 because I don't want him to touch that.
No.
Ooh.
It's too much.
Ooh, poor Brad, too. I mean, I'll be downstairs and he'll be upstairs with the door closed and I'll still hear it. And I'll start screaming. He's like, how do you hear that?
That's hilarious.
Ooh.
You cannot do it.
Okay, well, all this talk about nurses is really setting us up. Nailed it. Yeah, you're going to hate it. Peach iced tea. So a couple weeks ago, we covered the infamous Lizzie Borden case, which you didn't know about, which is ridiculous. And I told you that growing up in New England, I heard about Lizzie Borden all the time, right? We had the jump rope song, we had books. It was a thing. But at the same time that Lizzie was doing her thing, there was a female murderer who was far more chilling than Lizzie. She had a body count higher than Jack the Ripper. And I didn't hear about her until recently.
Ooh.
Yeah. So today we're going to hear about Nurse Jane Toppan.
Jane Toppan?
AKA Jolly Jane.
Oh.
Yeah, I told you, just get ready. Just channel that feeling because you're going to have it.
Great. Should have got the mushroom tea.
Yeah. I read a bunch of articles, a book also written by Harold Schecter called Fatal, The Poisonous Life of a Female Serial Killer. That's where I got most of the information, but I wanted to throw out a recommended reading. There's also a book called America's First Female Serial Killer, Jane Toppan and the Making of a Murderer, and that's by Mary Kay McBrayer. And that one's interesting because it sticks to the facts, but she writes it like a story. So she takes all these, educated guesses and assumptions to kind of weave in. So things like in the moment, she obviously nobody knows how Jane was feeling or what she was wearing, but she'll piece it together. So if you like the case, I recommend it for everybody but Alana.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and not read those.
Yeah, well, we know that. But what I like about that book is the author, Mary Kay, wanted to dive into the story because she really wanted to understand how the human part of Jane left.
Oh, okay.
Which is always what I'm curious about too.
Right. How can these people do these things?
Yeah. Was there something anyone could have done to change it? I mean, was it destined to be? You'll see that Jane had, the chips were stacked against her. I mean, every marker you can hit, it's not going great. But, there's plenty of people who have traumatic upbringings and go the other way. So,
yeah,
that's always fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So, we're going to just jump right in to poor Jane Toppan here. Jane was actually born Honora Kelly in about 1854. And she was the youngest daughter to two poor immigrants who had settled in Boston, Massachusetts. They were from Ireland.
Oh, no.
So Jane's mother died from tuberculosis when she was really young, which meant that the girls were left with their father, Patrick Kelly.
Patrick!
Oh, boy. Keep that Irish accent under lock and key. So nobody has any idea of the kind of childhood that Jane and her sisters endured, but everybody agrees that it was probably terrible. Question to the lady in front.
Thank you. How many siblings did she have?
Well, they think that she was one of 4, but it's really hard to tell about the other 2. For sure she had one older sister that they know of. They think there were 2 others, but there's no records of them after a while, so they're not 100% sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I said, everybody who came in contact with Jane and knew about her father agreed that it was probably terrible. And they say this because her father was known in the neighborhood as Kelly the Crack, which stood for Kelly the Crackpot.
Okay.
And he was an alcoholic with a mean temper.
It's great.
On top of the fact that he absolutely suffered from some sort of undiagnosed mental illness. And I know that because when Jane and her sister Delia were very young, he actually dropped them off at an orphanage because he knew he couldn't care for them anymore.
Oh,
and then shortly after dropping them off, he tried to sew his eyelids shut. So I'm guessing that he wasn't the most stable parent prior to that.
Yikes.
Right? So Jane is experiencing God knows what in her early years, right? Really setting her up. Plus, we know now she has a predisposition to mental illness.
Yeah.
So Jane was thought to be probably 6 and her sister Delia 8 when they were dropped off at the orphanage. It was called the Boston Female Asylum. And the orphanage was founded in 1800, so she's dropped off in 1863. So at the time that Jane was dropped off, it was incredibly popular. It's on average got about 100 girls in it from the ages of 3 to 10. And it started in the 1800s, and it was 1800 even. It was strictly an orphanage. But that same year that it opened, a mother came to them pleading for them to take her daughter because she could not care for her. And the board voted and they agreed. And so then they changed it to be orphans as well as girls in need, but the parents had to relinquish custody.
Okay.
And can you imagine just for a second having to make that choice?
No, I can't.
I mean, these parents are, I'm assuming, literally deciding between that child's going to starve.
Right.
Or this child might have a chance if I give up my child.
God, yeah. That's got to be excruciating.
Yeah. So at the orphanage, the girls learned to read and write, but only as much as could possibly be needed in their lives, which for poor girls in the 1800s is not a lot.
No,
so most of their coursework, air quotes, was domestic work.
Okay.
Right? And the girls would live at the home until they were 11, and then at that age, they would be placed into a home as an indentured servant.
What?
Very few cases of actual adoption. Very few. Majority were placed as indentured servants.
This doesn't seem like a good setup.
Well, and hold on. The contract for the girls that got placed was they would be a domestic servant for the family from the age of 11 to 18, at which point they were free to do what they wanted, and they received $50 for their hard work over the years.
Oh my God.
And you have to understand, too, that it's not as though they're in the home getting the best of everything. By the time they're 18, they have very few options.
Yeah, of course.
You're either a domestic servant where you're at, somewhere else, or you're getting married, really.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much it. So the asylum, as it was called, was incredibly popular because the wealthy Boston families could get help for next to nothing, and there was a waiting list for these placements.
Jeez.
Yeah. So Jane and her sister are there for almost about 2 years before Jane gets placed, and Jane gets placed before Delia. Delia, sadly, would get placed when she turned 11, and she would become a sex worker and an alcoholic and die a sad death, unfortunately. But That's all they know. They believe one of Jane's other sisters was committed to an asylum. There's no rumors at all about the fourth possible sister.
Okay. That's terrible.
So Jane is adopted by Mrs. Toppan, Anne C. Toppan, who insists that Jane call her auntie. And very little is known about Mr. Toppan. Either he was already passed away or passed away shortly after. So it's really just Mrs. Toppan and her daughter Elizabeth.
And their indentured servant.
Yes. So Jane is in the house with both of them. And if you remember, Jane's name is not Jane. It's Honora Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Toppan immediately insists that she change her name to Jane Ann Toppan to take on the last name, even though she's not adopted.
Got it.
Because the name was too Irish.
I've never heard of that name before.
Honora?
Yeah.
Yeah. They called her Nora for short.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that's where that name comes from.
So she makes Jane totally change her name, and then she tells all of her friends, Mrs. Toppan's friends, or like her high society Boston friends, that Jane is actually Italian because Jane is has black hair, brown eyes. She's dark complected.
She's one of the dark Irish.
Yeah. And she tells everybody that Jane's Italian and that her parents died making their arduous journey over from Italy. And Jane was orphaned and Mrs. Toppan took her in. Okay.
I mean, Jane would have an American accent, right?
Yeah, she
grew up here.
Yeah, her parents had Irish accents.
Right. But she did not.
She may have had a little lilt when Mrs. Toppan took her in, but she for sure didn't as she got older.
Yeah, okay. So I was like, straight from Italy, having a little bit of an Irish lilt.
Yeah, right.
Maybe people wouldn't know better.
Well, Jane probably didn't talk too much to these friends
to start.
Point. And Jane was placed incredibly young. They're usually placed at 11, but Mrs. Toppan took Jane when she was, and again, records are a little tough, probably 8 or 9.
Yikes.
At that time in history, Boston had an increase in Irish immigrants due to the potato famine in the late 1840s.
Yep.
So the majority of Irish people moving to America were farmers, which meant when they came over to a city, right, you're not going to be a farmer.
Right.
So they were often low-paid factory workers.
Got it.
So they're being attacked because they're poor, on top of the fact...
Gotta hate poor people.
...that they're not from Boston, on top of the fact that they're annoying. Catholic.
God, especially in like the young ages of America, like getting mad at new immigrants is just the stupidest thing. I mean, it's still stupid, but like, come on. Like 100 years ago, you weren't here either.
It just repeats and repeats. So, I mean, it's it's the 60s by this time, but it's still very much prevalent. And there's things like Irish need not apply on stores, things like that. So, Jane being Irish is a huge target for her, based off of Mrs. Toppan's prejudice. And even though she tells everybody that Jane's Italian and tried to erase it from her name, she does not let Jane forget that she is Irish. So every single mistake that Jane makes, whether real or imagined, is because she's Irish. That's what Mrs. Toppan says. Obviously, that's not true. But Mrs. Toppan will belittle her for, you didn't clean that right. It's because of this. Everything.
Oh, that sounds like a positive upbringing.
Yeah. And Jane is in charge of the whole house. She cleans. She helps with meals. She takes care of everything, and she's little.
Young.
Yeah, she's little.
I cannot imagine my little cousins serving a whole house.
I know, right? So she has it rough, for sure. And one of her coping mechanisms is to tell these really fanciful stories. And all the children love them, especially Elizabeth, her foster sister. And she tells stories about her family, where they really came from, and I mean, they're over the top, but Jane's a skilled storyteller. And she'll just sit there. The kids will just gather around her and she'll tell them stories for hours. And so Jane is finding out really quickly that she's pretty likable and she's good at getting people to like her.
Uh-oh.
And everybody loves Jane. It's how she makes do, right? She's really kind and entertaining and personable. So, like I said, everybody really likes Jane, Elizabeth included. Elizabeth loves Jane and calls her her sister.
Oh, wow.
And later calls her her best friend.
Okay.
The problem with that is Jane is working around the clock and Elizabeth is, a lady of leisure.
Sitting on her butt.
Yeah. Jane's waiting on her. Jane's taking care of the house. Elizabeth showered with new clothes and gifts. Where
I have a guess that Elizabeth's not going to make it out too well.
Well, Elizabeth's lacking a little self-awareness about how Jane might not feel the same about her.
Yeah.
I mean, Jane has to clean her chamber pot. So
no.
We know how you feel about that. Yeah, that's enough to make you get angry. So needless to say, there's a little bit of growing resentment bubbling up in a young Jane Toppan, right? Who knows what happened to her the first 5 or 6 years. Then her name is erased. She's belittled for being Irish. And now her foster sister says, oh, we're best friends. Here's my chamber pot for the day. Yeah. So when Jane turns 18, right, she's free. And very ceremoniously, Mrs. Toppan hands her $50 and says, well, you can stay or you can go, right? I mean, years this woman has worked for her. And Jane has nowhere else to go, so she just decides to stay. Depending on the source, it was a little before or a little after. Jane actually falls in love and is proposed to and given a ring. And I have to imagine that she is this is huge for her, right? It's a way out.
Yeah.
It's finally somebody who cares about her. She's going to go live her own life, finally.
Right.
That man never comes back, and Jane hears through the grapevine that he's married another woman.
Oh, no.
So Jane herself says that was a huge turning point for her in her life. That made a big impact on her.
Yeah, I get that.
That whole theme of abandonment, right? Her mother abandoned her through death. Her father abandoned her through mental illness. Like, just spending her whole life trying to prove that she's good enough and trying to overcompensate with her great personality. And then it happens again.
Ugh, terrible.
Yeah. So not too long after Jane decided to stay on, Mrs. Toppan actually died from natural causes. She was just old.
Okay.
We're pretty sure. We're pretty sure. And then Elizabeth and her husband, Oramel. I've never heard that name in my whole life.
Yeah, what? Where is that from?
I have no idea. Anyway, he's a church deacon. They took over the house, and Jane stayed on with them.
And she's getting a wage now?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know. She has an attic room that doesn't, it's in the attic, so I have to imagine that's the worst room in the house.
Yeah. It's gotta be hot in the summer.
They feed her, and probably cold in the winter.
Yeah, it's Boston.
But anyway, she stays on for a little bit. Eventually, I don't know what prompted her to make this decision, but eventually Jane says, it's time for me to move out. There are some speculations that it's because she actually was flirting with Oramel.
Yeah.
But
she's very charming.
She's very charming, but Oramel has no desire to be with Jane. So, and I should mention too, around this time, Jane put on a lot of weight, which partly led to her Jolly Jane nickname, which was meant in a mean way because she was overweight. So like jolly, like, Santa Claus kind of thing.
That's okay. Rude.
Yeah, I know, and unnecessary. But anyway, she decides to leave, and she's going to be a nurse. She decides.
Doesn't she need some training?
She goes to the Cambridge School of Nursing, which is a very prestigious school at the time.
How'd she get in?
Well, she went to school. Mrs. Toppan did let her get an education. But nursing in the 1800s is a little different than it is today. So, in fact, before 1850, so this is much later, probably 1887-ish. But before 1850, no training was even required. And nursing was usually given to women in workhouses as part of their sentence, and many of them could not even read, which led to perfect medication administration. Like, no mistakes happened there.
Oh, no.
Like, here, take this pill. This will do. So it didn't go great. And then in 1850, the powers that be said, hey, the nurses should have some training. So they started opening schools.
Really?
Yeah. And so Jane is attending the school. It's a 2-year program, 7 days a week. You sleep in a cubicle, and you have to share that space. You start out basically doing custodial work. Okay. So you're only allowed to clean the floors, do the laundry, grab those chamber pots.
She's good at that.
Exactly. She excels. She's like, I don't know, this is easy. I don't know how to do this. And I don't have Elizabeth telling me I'm her favorite sister. Like, golly. She's very good at it. And then you kind of graduate to, I guess, what an LNA would do today, patient baths, wound care. Yeah. And then you get up to doing more nursing duties, having your own ward, having your own patients. But just like anything in the day, there are stupid rules in place. And I don't mean stupid rules like while you're treating a patient, you have to do this. I mean, once you're done for the day, your free time also has restrictions. So after you're done for the day at the hospital, you can't smoke, you can't have a drink, you can't go to the hair salon.
What hair salon? What's wrong with that?
I don't know. Okay. But if you get your hair cut, you're in trouble. That's all I know.
What in the world?
So, like I said, Jane's rocking it as a nurse. This is easy for her. Mm-hmm. And this is where she gets her nickname Jolly Jane. Everybody loves her. Doctors request her.
Oh, that's nice.
Patients request her in front of other nurses. They're like, hey, can we get Jolly Jane in here? I like her the best.
Good.
So even though the doctors and the patients are in love with her, it's not going great for the other nurses.
Sure.
They don't feel the same way.
Shocker.
Because on top of Jane being favored, Jane's also using her incredible story skills to spread some pretty mean lies about her fellow trainees.
Ooh, nasty.
Does things like get them dismissed, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Spreading things like, oh my gosh, so-and-so was at the hair salon yesterday.
Really got that friend.
Yeah, really good. They got an updo. So shocking. They're out. So she's got this love-hate thing going on. She's got these dual personalities starting to come through.
Yeah.
Think about it. She's probably been jolly for 20-something years, like 27, 28 years. And now the other side of her is just, like, we're out. We're flexing on this, and it's not going to go great for her.
Jolly and jaded.
Yeah. So, and again, those abandonment issues bubble to the surface. The patients love Jane. Jane loves the patients. She loves them so much, she doesn't want them to leave.
So she keeps them sick.
Well, first she starts off real gentle. She just falsifies a few records, right? Patient A, they're still running a fever today, and she'll write it in so that they'll stay a little longer.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always work. And the doctor's like, well, they're fine now. Get them out of here. So then Jane starts giving them some medicine. Oh, look, they're still sick.
Slippery slope, Janie.
Yeah, it's real slippery real fast. So what ends up happening is Jane realizes that she really likes giving them medication.
Uh-oh.
And she starts doing her own experiments at night.
What?
Mm-hmm. She starts experimenting with morphine. She would administer morphine, and then she just stands there and watches to see what happens.
Ew.
She really, really likes to watch their eyes as they, start to lose their focus, dilate, constrict, all that stuff.
Oh my God.
And then their breathing would become labored. They'd start to sweat. And if she was lucky, they'd have convulsions, which was one of her faves. Yeah. It gets dark real quick. And then she learns to counteract the morphine. She can bring them back with atropine, which is the opposite of morphine, I'm told. So it kind of makes it very confusing for doctors. They have no idea what's going on. And I think initially she's just doing it to bring them back.
Yeah.
she feels powerful, but, I'm guessing she doesn't always bring them back because people start dying.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how many people died while she was at Cambridge, but it's estimated that at least a dozen under
What?
Jane's special care. She's
Oh.
also starting to develop at the same time. She's pretty vocal about how she feels about elderly patients. She's quoted as saying, "There's no use in keeping old people alive." Which I don't think...
Make that woman a nurse.
That's going to be a hit on the geriatric ward, if I'm guessing.
Oh my God.
So for some reason, she decides to switch nursing schools, and she goes over to Mass General, which is also really prestigious. And again, glowing reviews. Doctors love her. She's the best. Patients love her. She's fantastic. The other nurses, not so much. But the head nurse actually takes a leave of absence, and Jane is immediately recommended to fill her shoes.
Wow.
So Jane is doing exactly what she did at Cambridge. She's falsifying records. It's also thought among the nurses that she started stealing a little bit here and there, but nobody can prove it. A ring off of a patient or a bracelet or something.
What? That's way more not like a paperclip at work.
Yeah. She's also hitting it up with those experiments. Don't you feel that Jane should have just been a scientist and called it a day?
Yeah, probably, but she probably wouldn't be allowed.
I mean, Marie Curie was rocking it. Like, find a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
Find a way. So she's continuing with her experiments, and this won't come out until much later, actually until Jane's trial. But one patient in particular, her name is Amelia Finney. She was at the hospital where Jane was, and she was being treated for a uterine ulcer, which they burn off with nitrate of silver. So she's feeling...
That sounds terrible.
Awful. Yeah, doesn't it? So as you can imagine, Amelia is in terrible pain that night after the procedure, and she can't sleep. She notices Jane standing over her bed, and she begs her to get a doctor because she's in so much pain. And Jane says, "There's no need for that. Here, I've got something for you." And she sits her up, and she gives her mineral water, lets her take a sip. It's filled with morphine tablets. Very quickly, Amelia feels herself start to go numb. Not just numb as in the pain's subsiding, but numb as in she can't even really move.
Yeah. Because she's overdosing, probably.
I mean, it's like slow, sluggish movements. And then she feels the bed covers pulled from her. She hears the noise of the mattress, and she feels Jane get into bed with her.
What?
Here's the peach iced tea. You're going to hate it. Jane starts to kiss her face and whisper into her ear.
No.
And essentially molest her.
Ew.
And then somebody comes into the hallway, and Jane jumps out of the bed and runs away.
What?
The next morning, Amelia thinks she must have dreamt it, right? She's so delirious with pain, that could not have happened. So she kind of just pushes it out of her mind. And then years later, she will actually testify. And can you imagine testifying at that time to something like that?
Oh, God. I don't even know what to say.
So she's really one of the only surviving victims who was going through the Jane Toppan protocol. I mean, there were several people that Jane poisoned just to get sick, but that was her intention. You see the full... from Amelia's testimony, we can understand how she administered it.
Mm-hmm.
You understand then what she was doing. She was crawling into bed with her patients.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, it's gross.
Oh, wow.
And how do you get there? And Amelia specifically remembers her pulling her face back and staring in her eyes because she loved to watch the eyes.
I hate this.
I told you, peach iced tea. So Jane is actually dismissed from Mass General, but not for that. Nobody knows about that. That's under wraps. She's dismissed because she left the hospital without permission.
Okay.
Which is against the rules.
Can't go to the salon.
So after a little while, she just goes back to Cambridge.
I'm back.
No problem. Guys, I'm back. You love me. Now, at Cambridge, there's a young trainee who becomes sick with a fever. The doctors assign their best nurse to the case. Jane's on it.
Great. You're going to be great.
Jane's probably a little jealous of this recruit.
Mm-hmm.
And that young woman, who's only 19, her name is Maddie, starts to convulse violently. Luckily for her, a doctor just happens to be walking by, and he rushes in, and it takes him a great deal of effort, but he's able to save her.
God.
He does not understand her symptoms, so he assigns a different nurse to watch over her 24 hours. And when Jane comes back in to complete her medication, the nurse is there and Jane's not able to.
Good. So
one of the other doctors starts thinking on it, and there were rumors that at Mass General she was really too free with the opium. Not intentionally. They have no idea. Like, they can't even begin to fathom what's really happening. But that doctor thinks that she's either careless, reckless, or maybe, overly confident and thinks she knows best.
Yeah.
And he thinks that's what happened here. And so he brings his concerns to the board, and they dismiss her for not being, not following the rules of opium administration.
Right.
No idea.
Wow.
That she's killing people. It's estimated that she killed an additional dozen at Mass General.
What?
So she's now thought to have killed up to 24 people.
Jeez.
So you think to yourself, what's Jane going to do? Don't worry. Doctors and patients still love her. How charming must this woman be? Do you know what I mean?
I don't get it.
She must be unbelievable.
Yeah.
So she decides to become a private nurse, which is cool. She gets paid way more money.
Yep.
$25 a week, and it's not as arduous, right? You got one patient, maybe a family.
Make your own schedule.
Well, I don't know about that. It's probably still pretty hard. You're probably there all the time. I don't think she's remote nursing, but several doctors are happy to write a recommendation, and before long, she's the most sought after private nurse in the Boston area.
God, if they only knew.
Yeah. So after this, we start to actually learn some of Jane's victims before nobody knows. They're hospital patients, and nobody knows. It's really tricky. Did that person die of a heart attack? They came in for something. Maybe they did. Or sometimes the patients didn't even have names assigned to them. So Jane herself later would say she didn't know.
Wow.
But anyway, it's the late 1890s, mid 1890s. She's renting from a couple who have the best names, Israel and Lovey Dunham.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's a private nurse, but they're her landlords. And she comes home one night, and these are her quotes. Israel's getting feeble and fussy. She's had enough of it.
Okay.
So in 1895, she gives him some mineral water.
See ya.
He dies of heart failure.
Yeah.
According to the doctor. And God, this woman, I wish there was video on her, because Lovey is distraught and just begs Jane to stay on because she doesn't know what to do, and she loves Jane. And Jane agrees.
My God.
Jane moves in and stays in the house with Lovey.
Uh-oh.
She stays in the house for 2 years.
Whoa.
2 years. And then Lovey's getting too old. Jane gives her some mineral water.
She
in
hates
1897.
Old people.
She does. She's okay.
Oh, God.
So Jane also spends a lot of summers on the Cape. People on the Cape Cod love her.
Wow.
People on the Cape Cod? I don't think that's right. But the families in Cape Cod love her. They drop off their kids for the day, and she watches their kids. Yeah. I mean, they're just like, Jane's the best, man. It's great having
she's a good
medical professional around, babysitter. She's so jolly. I mean, the fact that she's killed double digits right now, she better be just shooting sunshine out of her face.
Yeah.
Like, that's how jolly she needs to be. And her butt. Yes. Like, I can't wrap my head around this. But this is the darkest one. And you called it. So in 1899, Jane's spending the summer on the Cape, and Elizabeth's not feeling great. She's a little depressed.
Oh, boy.
And she misses her best friend and her sister.
Yeah, her chamber pot cleaner.
So Jane says, come on out to the Cape. Spend a few days with me. We'll have some sister time.
You're going to get something.
Elizabeth is thrilled. Poor Elizabeth. She sounds so naive. She really does try to treat Jane as well as she understands to treat her. Like, I don't think it ever crossed her mind that Jane feels like a servant, which is ridiculous. But
yeah, that's literally what she was.
Yeah, she's not getting it. Like, hello, Elizabeth. So Ormel's thrilled too. He's so grateful to see Elizabeth feeling better, and he gives her $50 and he sends her on the train. Like, bye, honey, have a great day.
Wow.
So Elizabeth gets there, and her and Jane spend the day just everything Elizabeth has ever wanted. Picnic at the beach, right? They're under the parasols. It's everything you'd want.
Oh, no.
And then they go home for dinner.
Nope.
And Jane gives her some mineral water.
See ya.
And then she sits up all night with her, crawls into bed, holds her, whispers something in her ear.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She calls Ormel, lets him know the next day that Elizabeth's sick.
Yeah.
And Ormel comes out, and the doctor says that Elizabeth died from stroke. Here's where it gets... Elizabeth goes up to Ormel, the grieving husband, and he's genuinely distraught by all accounts.
Wait. You mean Jane?
Who'd I say? Elizabeth? Oh, yeah, not her ghost. Yeah. Sorry. Elizabeth, sadly, is deceased. Jane walks up to the grieving husband, Ormel, and she says, she must have been an incredible actress. She says, hey, Elizabeth's dying wish was for me to have her gold pocket watch.
No.
And Ormel's immediately gives it to her, thinking, oh, my wife is so thoughtful. And then Jane pawns it for money.
Oh, my God.
Ruthless. Also, wow. Ormel opens up Elizabeth's purse, and all the money is gone. And he asks Jane about it. She's like, oh, I don't know. Weird.
She's got a little spendy.
Yeah, she bought a lot of taffy down at the store. I don't know what to tell you, Ormel. And Jane would later say, I held her in my arms and watched with delight as she gasped her life out. And Jane said that Elizabeth is the only victim that she actually didn't like. She said she hated her sister. Not her sister, but
we knew that.
She really liked all the other victims she murdered.
Cool. That's what matters.
Yeah, Elizabeth, she was resentful, all that chamber pot stuff.
Wow.
Elizabeth's gone. Later in that same year, we know about this victim because a 70-year-old widow named Mary McNear caught a little cold, which is why I say, of course, I have a cold today.
Don't call her.
And her granddaughter sounds very caring, and she's concerned. So she calls the doctor to check on her grandmother, and the doctor says, I think she's going to be just fine. It's just a little cold. She'll be okay. And the granddaughter says, I'm worried about her being alone. And the doctor says, don't worry, I'll get my best nurse on it.
No.
She lasts 2 days with Jane.
Yeah. Before
she dies.
Don't keep the elderly alive. That's what we say.
Yeah, right? I mean, anybody over 70 doesn't stand a chance with Jane. So in 1900, Jane goes to visit her friend, Myra Connors. Now, Myra is a dining hall matron at a school. And when Jane gets there, she thinks it's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah.
Like, she's given a place to live, and the job seems easier than nursing. So guess who gets sick? Myra Connors. And then once she passes, Jane goes to Myra's boss and says, hey, listen, I don't know if you know this, but Myra was getting ready to go on a leave of absence, and she trained me fully. I'm up to speed on the job, so I'm ready.
God.
And they let her. And do you know what she does? It's like, she tells them that, and then they kind of hem and haw about it and agree. And then Jane says, well, give me some time to think about it. Then she acts like, you know what? I appreciate it. I just wanted to let you know. Let me think on it for a few days.
She is something else.
She's very talented at these very talented at being manipulative. So she gets the job. Unfortunately, she's not good at it. Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, now you've got access to kill a whole dining hall. I don't know what would happen, but she's good at the work part of it, the food and the serving and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a huge component that involves money management, buying the inventory, doing the books, and she can't hang. She's never done it. So she gets fired.
Yeah.
She goes back to nursing.
Lovely. Great for the people.
So I told you that she spent summers at the Cape.
Mm-hmm.
One family in particular loved Jane, and they let her rent one of their little cottages, but Jane never paid the rent.
God.
And it had gone on for a while, and she owed them a large amount of money.
Uh-oh.
So the matriarch of the family, Mrs. Davis, decides that she's going to go to Boston to visit Jane and get the money because it's been a minute, and she owes her quite a bit. So Mrs. Davis goes to Boston. Jane is currently staying with Mr. and Mrs. Beadle, and she's staying with them because Jane heroically let the Beadles know that her housekeeper was a drunk. And then Jane stepped in, a.k.a. Jane poisoned her just enough to make her look drunk until they kicked her out.
Perfect. Good job, Jane.
Resourceful. So Mrs. Davis explains why she's there, and Jane acts embarrassed and says, let me get you a drink. You've had such a long journey. Cue the mineral water.
Oh, my God.
And then she drinks it, and Jane says, all right, let's go to the bank. I'll get you that money right now. And
wow.
They make it a few steps out of the house before Mrs. Davis collapses. Mrs. Davis happens to also be a diabetic.
Oh, no.
So that's what everyone thinks is happening, that she's in a diabetic coma.
Oh, sure.
Jane spends the entire week giving her morphine and atropine, letting her weave in and out of this diabetic coma.
That's going to be rough on your body.
Until she dies.
Yeah.
The family loves Jane so much, even though she owes them a ton of money, that please, Jane, will you come back with us and take care of us during this time?
Oh my God.
Absolutely, I will. So Jane goes back and lives with the Davises. She moves in for the whole summer. After she moves in, some fires start being set around town. In the day, well, not around town, at the Davises specifically. And so Jane starts a rumor that she noticed a stranger lurking around, and the whole town's in an uproar thinking there's some arsonist out on the loose. It's just Jane starting fires. Jane. And then Jane starts spinning a tale. So it's Mrs. Davis, who sadly passed away. There's Mr. Davis, and then they have two daughters, but they're adult daughters with their own family. But they happen to be there because their mother just died.
Yeah.
So Jane starts spinning a tale that one of the daughters, Genevieve, is suicidal.
Oh my God, Genevieve, get out of there.
Well, Genevieve dies shortly after. That rumor starts. And then Jane heroically tells people that there was a needle by her, but I took care of it so no one had to see it.
Stop.
Implying that Genevieve injected herself and killed herself.
Oh my God.
Shortly after that, Mr. Davis doesn't come down for breakfast. And Jane lets Genevieve's daughter go up and get Grandpa. And Grandpa won't get up. Because Grandpa is dead.
Oh.
So now there's only one person left. Jane's favorite, by the way, and who Jane says is one of her best friends, Minnie Davis.
Oh. BFF.
Minnie's lost her whole family.
Yeah.
Right? Not her husband and her kids, but her whole, family before she met them. And Jane's comforting her, here, have something, a little something to drink to take the edge off.
No.
Minnie's in a coma.
I mean, people have to get suspicious now. Comas are not transferable like that.
Minnie dies as well. The whole family's dead in 6 weeks.
Dude, somebody's got to see something.
So Jane leaves, and you know where she decides to go? She's going to go back to hang out with Ormel.
Oh my God.
Apparently, in January, when she was there for the holidays, she took care of Ormel's housekeeper. So Ormel should be alone. And she's going to have a chance. And the only reason she's going to Ormel is because she asked Minnie's husband if she could move in with them and take care of them, but he said, no, thanks.
Good idea there.
Yeah, saved your life, dude. So Jane heads back to see Ormel. So she gets there, and Ormel's sister answers the door.
Uh-oh.
Jane's not happy with this. So, and Ormel's sister's like 70, which, as we know, is Jane's least favorite age. So, I mean, it's only a couple of days, and Ormel's sister dies.
See ya.
I mean,
you were never gonna last.
Ay. So Jane just plans to stay on with Ormel, but he's pretty upfront that she can't stay permanently. So Jane pulls a little Marianne Cotton and gets him some tea this time.
Okay.
And makes him just sick enough so that she has to care for him, but that he'll stay alive.
Does anybody have a suspicion? I mean, come on.
She nurses Ormel back to health for a whole week. And you ask if somebody has a suspicion. There is one man who has a suspicion who's my favorite, and it is Minnie's father-in-law. He's a weathered sea captain, Captain Gibbs. And
Captain Gibbs?
Yeah.
That's an amazing name.
Not having any of it. And he says that doesn't make sense. Minnie was a strong, healthy woman, and so is Genevieve.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. And he eventually gets the bodies of the girls exhumed. So this is all going on while Jane's tending to Ormel.
My God.
Yeah. Anyway, Ormel gets better. Ormel has not changed his mind about Jane staying on, which was the hope that he'd see how valuable she was and let her stay. He says, no, you still have to leave. No. And then she says, well, I'm going to tell everybody that I'm pregnant with your child.
Whoa.
And he says, go ahead, because you're not.
Right.
And he says, get out. And so Jane goes up to her room and gives herself morphine and tries to commit suicide.
Is she like really in love with this guy?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of wanting to be wanted, and also, wouldn't that be the ultimate to be head of the house that you had to take care of your whole life? Now that you've gotten all the others out of the way.
God.
So she's under watch, and Ormel's even puts a nurse there 24 hours. The nurse goes down to get Jane breakfast one morning because Jane's feeling better, and she tries to do it again. The doctor walks in and stops her. Now, there's some back and forth whether a lot of people say Jane's so skilled at administering medication at that point that it was probably just her trying to get Ormel to feel sorry for her.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's hard to inject yourself with the right amount because Jane would
risky.
Jane would do it slowly over time.
Yeah.
And so Jane's not able to do that because she only gets one shot, and then she's not able to.
It's not like a drip that we have.
Yeah, she's not able to have the dexterity to do it again like she would normally. So I'm not sure if she truly meant to commit suicide or not. I mean, we know she is manipulative. I don't like to say that because obviously suicide and mental health is a serious problem, and this is just a different one-off. Like, nobody knows. So they weren't sure. Now, like I said, Captain Gibbs is getting into it. And on August 31st of 1901, the Boston Globe states that an inquiry into the Davis deaths has begun.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, now Jane spent most of her life trying to be valued, right?
Yep.
She's doing work that, as the author Mary Kay put, if you're doing it well, then nobody knows you were there.
Sure.
Which is really true. So this comes out, and shortly after that headline, the president is assassinated.
Oh.
President McKinley is shot on September 6th of 1901, and he dies on the 14th.
Whoa.
So the whole country is in this uproar.
Yeah.
Right? And then Jane is actually arrested on October 19th, 1901, which happens to oddly be the exact same day that the president's assassin was executed. So Jane's getting, not that she should get front page, I'm not saying she deserves it, but she's getting these little tiny squares in the paper because, like, there's bigger stuff going on. Jane.
But she hates that.
Yeah, and I only say that because I think it ultimately leads to why she was so vocal later on.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean?
God.
So Jane says she's innocent, and doctors and patients are backing her up all around town. She's the best. Jane Toppan's the best. They exhume Genevieve and Minnie, like I said, and they found arsenic. So they think that that's what did it.
Uh-huh.
But then the undertaker tells them, well, no, the embalming fluids that I use have arsenic in them.
Gross.
So it's not like, sorry, that's me.
Yeah.
And Captain Gibbs says Jane's too smart to use arsenic. I would think that she would have used something like morphine because it's untraceable. He said, and he even seemed to know about atropine. I don't know how he's picking up this knowledge out on the seas, but he said, I would actually think that if somebody was given more or atropine and morphine, then that would make their eyes almost look normal, and nobody would know, which is exactly what Jane was doing.
Yeah.
So they start testing for that, and they find that traces of that. They're
going to find that all over the place, let me tell you.
And they also find that Jane, like, they couldn't find anywhere where Jane had purchased arsenic.
Uh-huh.
But man, was she buying morphine tablets left and right. So now it's making sense. And she's actually charged with Minnie, Genevieve, and Alden Davis, the father.
Good job, Captain Gibbs.
So they bring in some psychiatrists to talk to Jane to see if she's stable enough to withstand trial.
Yeah.
Right? And this is why I say I think her getting overshadowed before may have impacted this.
How dare you, McKinley?
Yeah, the president ruined her day. She starts off real cool, like, you're crazy, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she just starts blabbing. And her confession is some of the most disgusting stuff that was ever printed to date. And, she has this shocking insight into her own sickness. She says things like, this is a quote, "Why don't I feel sorry and grieve over it? I cannot make sense of it at all." Like, she knows she's supposed to feel different, and she doesn't.
Yeah.
She claims that there's 31 victims that she can remember. But some reports say at times they believe there's as many as 100.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah.
God, Captain Gibbs needed to come around sooner.
Yeah. So through her confession, they find out, right, Amelia Finney gave a testimony, so they kind of understand. And Jane admits that she got great excitement from crawling into bed with her patients as they're dying.
Ugh.
Yeah. She said her one regret, she shouldn't have killed the Davis family so close together. That was not cool.
One regret, because that's what got her caught.
I mean, you can see how she's just escalating. Yeah. I mean, she could not control herself towards the end. The fires were starting. I mean, it was just one right after the other. She had lost I mean, not that she had great control before, but I mean, they were spaced out.
God.
Yeah. And she started saying things like later that she actually wanted to be thought of as insane because I think she realized that she was going to be found guilty. And so she started, from being a nurse, she knew the right things to say.
Sure.
To make it seem like she was insane. And then she was hoping, I think, that an asylum would be better than jail, but also that maybe she'd get out.
Oh, of an asylum. She could charm her way out, probably.
Mm-hmm. So the day they took her, she was given a life sentence to Taunton Insane Asylum. The day they took her, she was as jolly as ever.
Jolly Jane.
Like, I'll see you guys in a minute. This is, be out soon. A few months after she was there, a reporter from the Boston Globe went to see her. And his description of it is, he says, it's an insane asylum. And he says everybody besides Jane looks one way and she looks another. So there's most of the people, their hair's messed up. They're in their bathrobes. Yeah. They're walking around aimlessly. There's a vacant expression in their eyes from heavy meds or, whatever they're suffering from. And Jane just sits there put together, her hair up, and just totally with it. Her eyes just look at you right through you. And he said when he left, he said, I can't imagine that spending your whole life in there is preferable to the death penalty.
Yikes.
So what happened, either because this was the road she was heading down, because she cannot be tip-top mental health.
No.
Or maybe it's just from being in an insane asylum for a few years. But by 1904, she really started to unravel. She started to refuse to eat because she thought everything that she was going to eat was poisoned.
Uh-oh.
She thought all of her victims were coming after her.
I mean, I wouldn't blame them.
And she actually lost so much weight that they had to start using a feeding tube.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she lost like 60 pounds. Just refusing to eat anything. And she would fight them every time, saying they were going to kill her.
Wow. So she ended up really belonging.
Yeah. She deteriorates pretty quick. I don't know how she got over it, but she did. I don't know if they started medicating her or what, but she actually lived to be 81 years old and died in 1938. But she started to slip. I mean, not that she was super stable before, but she started to lose her mind a little bit, and she would say things to the nurses. Because think about it, they're doing what she did her whole life. Like she's in her element.
Totally.
And as she's really old, she would say things like, "Get the morphine, dearie, and we'll go out into the ward.
Oh my God.
You and I will have a lot of fun seeing them die."
Stop.
And the attendants would be like, "All right, good night, Jane."
Jesus.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jane didn't. I would have to say that her mental health background from her family, paired with just
Abandonment
constant
issues.
abandonment and belittlement, and who knows what she survived from her father. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
If it was physical or sexual or just terrible neglect. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
But, I mean, her other sisters didn't become serial killers.
Right. So, yeah.
But they still had their own problems. So that's the story of Jolly Jane.
Well, I hated it, so thanks.
Yeah, PJC, I knew you would.
It's just bad.
Yeah. She's so far away from other female serial killers. Like when we did the Black Widows episode, Marianne Cotton, Tilly, Roberta, they all kind of fit into this same motivation, same, it's the same kind of victims, it's their family. I don't know if it's because Jane didn't really have a family, so she's just killing the patients around her, but also the motivation of the excitement of crawling into bed with them and the possible sexual motivation is so unusual for a female.
Yeah, right. I think it's about power. Because she really had no power growing up at all. And then she finally, she could control people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's how it started too. Like she liked watching them get close to death and then bringing them back. Mm-hmm. And then I think she stopped caring if they came back or not.
Yeah.
Clearly. Just like, well, that didn't work.
Oh. Brutal.
Gosh, I mean, she must have been the most charming human being that's ever walked into Boston, if that many people. I mean, she has rumors of petty theft and too much opium, and doctors are like, she's the best. Don't worry about that stuff. Like,
the best.
You got enough rings. She's perfect.
Ugh. Gross.
I mean, do you think there's ever a point in her life where it could have gone a different way, or do you think that was just how it would have been? If she says in the papers, if I had just married and had children, I wouldn't have done this, which I don't believe for a second. I think she just would have killed her family. But
I mean, I think she had a turning point when she got it to be 18.
I don't know. I feel like whatever is going to happen, it already happened. She must have been all that. I think it's got to be more gradual than that. All the little tiny things just building up.
Yeah.
Over time, rather than just one thing that flips a switch.
But like, if she hadn't become a nurse, she might never have done it.
I guess
she didn't have the tools.
I bet you then she would have started using other things like arsenic. I mean, Marianne Cotton was a nurse, wasn't she?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah, but I mean, Tilly and Roberta were not.
Right. Ugh.
Yeah. And I'd never heard of her. It's almost like, I don't know why Lizzie murdering her parents with an axe is more acceptable. But this one's almost too much. Like,
No.
nobody's going to talk about it. It's just too much stuff happening.
Right.
Let's sweep this one under the rug, guys. That never happened. We didn't just lose 24 patients at the hospital. Shh.
Yeah.
Plus the added, the patients being molested. That's not something that, the 1800s are going to come out talking about.
I guess not. Oh, it's so bad. She's terrible.
Yeah, she's so manipulative. Unbelievable.
Well, glad I could leave with this feeling on this beautiful Tuesday.
Peach iced tea. You're going to hate it. Yeah. Oh, Jolly Jane. Her nickname creeps me out too.
My advice for this week: if you're feeling charmed by somebody, second guess it.
I mean, I feel most charming people aren't going to murder you. Also, I would say 99.9% of nurses are unbelievable in this day and age. And they're incredible. They are not doing morphine experiments on their patients in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That's so creepy to me that she'd just do it and then sit back and watch.
Yeah, that's very disturbing. No thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Oh, poor Jane. Well, not poor Jane. Poor everybody Jane
else
talked to.
Yeah, basically.
I guess poor little girl Jane.
Yeah.
And then
whatever happened.
You're on your own after that. Holy moly.
Yeah.
Listen to your gut too. I think Captain Gibbs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, there have to be people along the way who also wondered.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's very sketchy.
Even that doctor, he guessed incorrectly, but he also listened to his gut saying, this is an unusual amount of people who are having these symptoms around her. She must be doing something wrong, because that makes the most sense. He saved countless lives at Mass General by getting her out of there. So, or Cambridge, wherever she was. I forget now. Gosh, yeah. So listen to your gut. Say thank you to your nurses, because all the other nurses are fantastic.
Yes.
And don't get your hair done if you're in an 1800s nursing program.
Don't you dare.
Jane was said to be out and about really drinking and being raucous when she was a private nurse too. She had those two sides. She's got to
celebrate her wins.
Jolly Jane really unleashed at the taverns later, telling really foul stories.
It's terrible.
Yeah. All right.
Well, with that terrible
story.
Yeah. Lovely.
Sorry.
Lovely. Wow, what a ruthless killer.
Yeah. And she unfortunately was smart.
Yes.
Yeah. She was very good at her walking the line between morphine and atropine. Think of how many people in that day and age she's probably better than most doctors at administering it, honestly.
Right.
She had the most practice. It all. She was doing those extra hours at night, so it's not fair to the doctors. They didn't get that one-on-one time.
Oh, God.
Gross. But, yeah.
Well,
I think also the last thing I'll say is, if you think you can make a difference in a kid's life, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Let's try to steer the Jane Toppans in a different direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good point. And something little can go a long way.
Yeah. Maybe if somebody had taken her away from her dad earlier, or maybe if she hadn't been an indentured servant for her whole life, maybe she would have had a chance in a different... Could have just been a good nurse. Yikes. All right. Well, you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram at
Tea Time Crimes.
You can email us at
teatimecrimes@gmail.com.
And we'd love story suggestions that fit Alana's delicate nature and tea recommendations.
Yes.
Or always. Just to say hi.
But don't send any morphine, because we won't accept it.
Yeah. Let's not elicit the travel of illegal activities. Shush. killing me. All right. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, I'm going to take care of this cold myself.
Boom.
Without any nurses.
Yeah.
And be back good for next week. All right.
Bye. All right. Bye.